Good morning. Are we ready to get started? How you doing, Alice? I'm good. Oh, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to get started here. Is yeah, are we live? Hello, we are there. We are. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm going to get started early this morning because we have quite a long agenda. I want to thank the Commissioner James Harsan for being here and Michelle Harris-Bandima. We have quite a long agenda and with a little bit of time. So what I would like to ask a favor from everyone when you come up and introduce yourself to present, could you please, when you present your PowerPoint, do me a favor, I'm probably acting like a professor now. Could you not read word for word? And you already know what's on your PowerPoint. We've read your PowerPoint, and the community will see your PowerPoint on the TV. So I would encourage the community to tape it in case they want to review it. But and you know that you look at the agenda, you can tell that we only have a few minutes for each presentation. So I would like to invite the school readiness, Operation School Readiness, to come forward, please. Good morning.
Lynette Washington, the Interim Chief Operating Officer. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Monique Rumo, and I'm the Assistant Director for Building Maintenance and Inspections.
Good morning.
Blaine Lipsky, Director of Facility Maintenance and Operations.
So this morning we're going to walk briefly through all of the summer tasks that the operation teams engage in over the summer. And we're going to walk through each one of the departments very quickly. I'm going to talk about what the department does for the district and then talk a little bit about some of the details of what their summer readiness tasks are. We're going to walk through each one of these departments except facility planning, just because that department does not do extensive summer work. So for the Health and Safety Department, this department generally does facility assessments, looking for anything that's related to pest-related issues. They also do emergency preparedness, which are your drills that happen during the year, asbestos abatements, if that is happening because of the roof issues or because of condensation issues, and then they also do water sampling. In terms of the summer readiness work, right now we have completed the training for all of principals related to emergency preparedness. So these are all of the drills. Previously, there were over probably 15 drills that were happening in schools, and this year we were able to narrow it down, combining some drills so it's not interrupting the classroom environment. We've also completed all of the asbestos abatements that are happening within our schools in preparing for teachers to return. And then any of the environmental and safety inspections, those are ongoing, that are going to be happening throughout the year. Pest control inspections and treatments have all been completed and done in time for when teachers return, and then the water sampling most of it has been complete, but some of the samplings are still ongoing.
Question, real quick. So you've done all the abatement for the asbestos? I mean, asbestos abatement for all the schools?
So
all
the asbestos abatement for all the schools have not all been completed.
How
So
many
there may be some that may have been identified during the year. So a lot of that is ongoing, but any of the extensive treatment happens during the summertime. So if there has to be removal of tiles and some of those different things, that happens before teachers come back on site.
And the building is vacate, I mean, the whole building is empty when you do the asbestos?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I'm Alice Watson, Director of
Hi.
Health and Safety. And the asbestos abatements that were conducted over the summer break primarily were related to risk management projects that were identified earlier in the year and had quite extensive damage, so we put it off while schools were not in session. Some of the areas were also minor. So it was approximately 10 projects that we performed during the summer.
How many
They're
do you
now
have left?
complete. Beachfield was recently identified with additional work due to rain damage, but that project will be complete this week. It's a small area, less than 100 square feet, in one of the corridors.
So you only have one school that you haven't done?
One school remaining.
Well, that's excellent. Yeah, I'm impressed with that. Okay. And the water quality sampling, you have 10 more schools, or you did 10 schools?
We did 8 schools. 2 schools were completed during the spring. Dorothy Heights and Lyndhurst, since they were recently completed and sampled by the 21st Century School. We don't have to sample them again until July 2019. So they are on our deferral list until July 2019. The additional 6 schools are underway by the Maryland Stadium Authority and should be complete soon.
I just have one basic question. Of looking at all the schools, how many schools do you have left to sample?
This year,
Well, period. Oh, for this year, because you do it year by year.
yes,
Okay.
there's a requirement for 2019. But for
Okay.
this year, all of the required schools have been done.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll just add this as a clarification, Ms. Washington, you can tell me if I'm incorrect, but when you say that you've finished all of the pest control inspections, that's of the schools that were on the list to be identified this summer. That's not a comprehensive list,
It's a
correct?
comprehensive
Right, it
list.
So all 187 buildings?
150 some odd buildings. And so what happens is there is an assessment, an inspection that is done in the beginning part of the summer, and then they go back and return to do anything that's extensive, right?
Yes.
All of our facilities are checked for pest
All
control,
facilities.
whether there needs pest control treatment, and then any ones that do receive that in the summer.
And water, so kind of all these categories?
So water, remember, the vast majority of our schools are on bottled water. So the flushing test is for those schools that have switched over to point-of-use filtration, or to the newer buildings where they have new pipes and then have point-of-use filtration system,
Right.
which is in the teens, the number of schools that fit in that category, yes? Or lower?
Can you-
The number of schools.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
The number of schools that are not using bottled water,
13 at the time.
13, yeah.
At this time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So the next department is Facility Design and Construction. So this is the department that does most of our capital improvement projects. So we have summer projects that are happening right now that are in some stage of construction or design. And then if there are any program movements that happen, so a program moves from one building to another one, we usually do major renovations in order to accommodate the programs for that facility. And so we have about 25 projects that are in some phase of construction. We also have about 28 projects that are in some phase of design. And then we have 3 programs that are moving, and so that's construction work that's happening. For maintenance operations, a lot of this work is around the Blitz work, so repairs that are happening scheduled within our schools. Similar to health and safety, there's an assessment that is done in the beginning part of the summer. Work orders are identified and created, and then they go out, and the team is scheduled to go out and do these Blitz, whereas there's a large team of different tradesmen that come to a school at a scheduled period of time, and they work in the school to address repairs. Right now, we are in the 8th week of the repairs, And we are also always identifying any concerns. And a lot of the concerns are generally around communication of what work orders are to be completed. That's communication between principals and also our team. Most of those work orders have been completed. We are working all the way up until August 31st to get all of our work orders done within our schools. And so some schools are going through the second phase of these repairs.
So just a question on timetable process. If we're doing assessments of buildings the first week of summer, so the first week when children aren't present, is there then a significant lag in ordering materials, in arranging and choreographing who's going where? Would it make more sense to do this inspection during spring break?
So actually how it works, our Blitz cycle, it's when we send our lead technicians in to do an inspection, and then the week later, they go in and they do their repairs. All of our inventory is ordered in advance, and we order that throughout the year. And so this actually hasn't been updated. We're presently in week 10, so we've already completed our Blitz for every school for the summer. And we're now in our last 2 weeks where we're focusing on schools of concern. And so we're working on work orders that we could not get to during that 9-week Blitz cycle that happened during the summer.
You went back for your Blitz and there was work that was not completed in some of those schools, so you're going back to complete it.
I was just trying to figure out how to get you more space to be able to do this
So,
without.
and the Blitz cycle, just to be clear too, is not unique to the summer months too. The Blitz cycle is something that happens during the regular school year. It is a new approach that the team has developed, and I just want to give kudos to the team that has really been thinking through how to more proactively address our maintenance and our preventive maintenance needs. And so this is, when did you first put in place the Blitz cycle?
So we put this in place last August, last school year. And so we had already had 5 Blitz cycles prior to this summer.
So in the regular school year, other than the summer, you do them quarterly or every other month? Every other month.
We are now going to do them every 6 weeks. So last fiscal year, we were doing them every 8 weeks. We're now able to do it every 6 weeks with our new structure.
I have a layman question. This is the first time I heard the term blitz. You use that to define the work that has to be done at each of the schools? Is that
So,
what it?
yes, ma'am. So a Blitz is the amount of time it takes an area facility manager who has a cluster of schools. That's the amount of times it takes him to cycle through his entire region, doing
Okay.
one inspection and one Blitz. The Blitz is when minor repairs take place, because that is what that Blitz team does. Doors and hardware, plumbing, minor
I figured that
electrical.
was what it was.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just had never heard you guys say blitz.
Yeah, it's relatively new part of the work, and like I said, kudos to the team for developing it. And I can tell you, as I've talked to principals at the at the CEO's Institute and in other venues, I've heard a lot of positive feedback from principals. That this, in particular, I've heard from a few principals that this is the first, like this is a markedly better process this summer than it has been in the past, and that they really feel the impact of the Blitz in terms of being proactive about identifying repairs in their school. I mean, I think the team would acknowledge, and we would all acknowledge, we still have improvements to make to that process, including making sure that principals have access to the School Dude website, which where you can see the work orders that are pending and the status of them, and can place work order requests. And so that's coming. And I think some of the things on the negative side that I've heard back is that sometimes in the repair work, not everything on the list that was, so 1 week you go and you identify what needs to be fixed, and the next week you go back and fix it. And I think in some cases we haven't been able to get through everything on the repair list.
Exactly.
And so I think we're still working through that. But generally, I think everybody has kind of felt it's quite palpable how different and more proactive this approach is. We're getting much more ahead of the preventive maintenance and maintenance work at our schools.
Thank you.
Do you want to cover the next?
So this slide goes through our stats. Again, this hasn't been updated for the summer. So our goal for the summer was to complete about 85% of the work orders. The reason for that is because with a Blitz team, the work that is identified, about 15% of that belongs to other departments. And so this is just showing our completion rate. So here we're about 75%, but we've now pushed up to 80%. And then the right side just shows exactly what's happening during a Blitz. So the flooring, custodial work, windows, this is the majority of the work that is happening in our schools. This covers about somewhere between 90 and 95% of the work that a Blitz team does in the building. School,
And
yes,
the
ma'am.
Blitz team has the capacity to do the work, or is it a lot of this getting contracted out?
This is what is within their capacity.
That's
But
fabulous.
what we said before, can you go back to the previous slide? So each team, at most, we have 6 technicians per region going to cover that team. So we're probably completing somewhere between 40 and 45 work orders per building when we go in. Usually, it's about double that amount in minor repairs that need to be done. So we circle back around in the next Blitz in order to get what we could not get done.
So when we tell that story, we really need to shout out how hard these people are working and how much work individual staff capacity is doing.
Absolutely. And then this slide is just a reflection of the schools that we identified. It was either the area facility manager, the lead technician who works with them, school support, or principals reaching out to us saying we have concerns about these particular schools. And so these are ones that are currently being blitzed in this week and next week. This lays out the process for flagging schools of concern. We wanted to make sure that this year we had a clear way of identifying and quickly seeing through our emails which schools were rising to the top so that we can quickly get them re-inspected and back onto the Blitz cycle for these 2 weeks. You want me to go through this one? Go ahead. Okay. So other readiness items that we had discovered throughout the school readiness process, this is feedback from principals and school support, are just items that we want to put in place for principals by start of the year, which starts with the document that you see in front of you. I know it's small print, but we need to help schools to understand the services and supports that we provide to them. But we're also creating a document that details out the school's responsibility in maintaining the health of their facility. So that includes just basic custodial tasks, who to reach out to. It's just ways that we can work together and have shared ownership with the building. And then a couple of other things. We anticipate having these items ready by the start of school. Yeah, that's all. Sorry about that.
No, it's good. And so then the next component is transportation. And so transportation ensures that all students that are, excuse me, all students that are eligible have IEPs that require transportation. They ensure that they have transportation. And so in terms of transportation readiness, do you want to go ahead? Talk through it. So one of the things that happens is generally a lot of routing. So when students present, there's information that is given from the schools that is given over to the district office. The information is verified and students are put on a bus. And so there's a routing process that happens. And so in terms of that, there is a lot of reviewing of the data and the information, students' address, and other information that is included in order for them to be verified and approved by district office. And so one of the things we wanted to highlight here was that last year, around this time, we had about 1,700 students that were verified to be put on a bus or routed on a bus. That was probably about half of the amount of students that actually needed to be verified. So this year, there was significant improvement because at this snapshot, we're at over 2,600 students. And so at the end of the year, well, not the end of the year, by the end of September, you tend to have almost close to 3,600 students that need to be put on a bus. And the importance of this is that to ensure that all students have a bus route that they're on and someone to pick them up at the start of school. So if students are not verified in time, then they won't be they won't be routed in time for school. And so this is just a layout of the process. So the schools, they enter the student data in, the district office receives, review, and approves the information in the request, and then the transportation department is what takes on the request, and then they are going to route the students. And then this is their general timeline of there's inspections of the buses to ensure that those buses meet all regulations. There's an assignment of the routes. The transportation department is going to go out and do practice runs to make sure that their vendors and their in-house team can actually get to all of those different places. Sometimes we have narrow roads, so that may be addressed. And then the time period, so that they're not arriving to a student's house late because they're just now not familiar with the route. There are parent letters that go out and also calls, and then there's training that happens for bus drivers and so for bus aides, and that happened this week. And then as a part of our customer service, there's also another follow-up call to ensure that parents have received letters. And then there's also additional training for our transportation coordinators. There's also another check that happens with our contractors to ensure that they committed to a number of different routes. Can they still go ahead and complete those routes? Who are their drivers and who are their aides? And then we also have a number of swing sites, so schools that are swinging to other sites because of the 21st Century Initiative program. And so then those additional buses are routed too. This year, they had a significant jump just because we had a large number of schools that were swinging that had very large populations.
Can I also jump in here a minute too? I also want to say kudos to this team who has really worked hard to make sure that we have buses, that our students are routed, and that we have contracts in place to transport our students. As Lynette said, this is a really high year for us in terms of bus need because of we're really ramping up the 21st Century Buildings program so the number of students in swing space, both the number of schools as well as the size of the schools, has meant that there's a huge push on our already challenging bus needs. So, there's a shortage of buses, there's a shortage of drivers nationally. That's not unique to us. And that's a real challenge. And because the team has put in all kinds of measures that have increased our monitoring, we have identified some operator in particular, a large one last year that we had to remove because of challenges with them not meeting our standards for driver qualifications. And so that also put added burden on the team. And so they've really worked very hard over the summer to get us to a point where we really can offer provide all the transportation we plan to for swing space. We were worried that we were going to have to maybe make a decision, which we did not want to make, but to not transport middle school students because we really literally didn't think we had enough buses to get students there. But through a lot of hard work of this team, we've gotten there. And so it's just huge kudos to where we are, both in terms of routing and in terms of really staving off what could have been really challenging for our students.
Thank you.
And so the last part is for MTA. MTA is for our middle and high school students. There's the one card and the prepaid ticket. So the one card is available for students from 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. for them to be able to ride. And then for those time periods after 8 p.m. and also on your weekend periods, then that is something that's paid for by the district, which is your prepaid card that allows students to do a number of different trips and space offs of summer learning, and then also sports trips and some of those different things that may happen outside of the normal school hours. That's it.
Did you guys have questions? Because before we finish, I did want to there's a large team from operations here, and I think since there's some new faces and some people have changed roles, I think it makes sense for you to do just quick introductions of the team, because there's a lot of exciting work going on there.
Or Allison, we're presenting the comprehensive maintenance plan. That's why they're all here. Do you want to do it then or now?
Not just to see how much fun a meeting is.
Okay, whether you do it now or after, and
Okay.
but it seems like there's a lot of people in the audience too, so just if you
You
could.
make it quick because we're already behind.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we have Bill Levy, he is joins us from the state. He is our project supervisor. He's been assisting on the comprehensive maintenance plan. We have Jeff Wilson, who is our new assistant director of mechanical services and engineering.
Welcome.
We have Alice Watson is health and safety. Monique Romo is introduced. Blaine Lipsky. And is there anybody else? And that's our team.
Okay, thank you very much, and welcome to Baltimore City Public Schools.
And I apologize, Dr. Washington.
Okay, next, we're going to have the budget milestone calendar for the FY20. Could you introduce yourself, and you can proceed. We're already behind, sorry.
No problem.
Okay.
We can be quick. Yeah. Good morning. I'm Courtney Desabay, the Special Assistant to the Chief Financial Officer.
John Walker, CFO.
All right, so I know we've barely started the school year for FY19, but we started work on the FY20 budget milestone calendar. We're extending our budget cycle a little bit this year. Usually it's about an 8-month period. Right now we're looking at doing it about a 10-month period, trying to get more space in to fit a lot of the feedback that we got last year on the budget calendar. So the first couple slides, which I won't go through in detail, are just the final milestones where we ended up last year's calendar. And then we have the next 2 slides are the outlines for this budget milestone calendar. What I will go through in greater detail is just some of the decisions that we made and some of the things that we tried to address. So one of the things was the enrollment projections. We had some feedback last year that the enrollment projection, the time period for feedback on the enrollment projections was very truncated. Schools didn't get a lot of time to give input on their numbers or give feedback. I'm sorry, is this a little better? Yeah. So last year, part of the feedback was that schools did not have enough opportunity to critique the numbers or give feedback on the numbers, or in central office, we weren't able to take everything necessary into consideration when doing the enrollment projections. So we wanted to make sure we gave more time for that in the calendar, so we build that in this year. So the goal would be that once the projections are developed, schools will again have the opportunity to go through the projections in detail with more time to engage their community or engage their teachers and whoever else in their building to get feedback on the numbers and make sure they feel comfortable with the numbers that we're putting into the projections. As we explained before, the numbers won't always be what the school leaders necessarily want them to be. There are a lot of factors in place. There's a lot of input from a lot of different offices in central office. A lot of it is related to grade configurations and student movement in 21st century and school openings and all these various factors, not just the birth rates and the trends. So we try to factor as much of that in as possible, and we wanted to make sure we had enough time to go through that entire analysis.
Courtney, can you just quickly go to the last 2 slides just to point out where in the process that changes, so people can see it?
Yes. So on, slide 4, we have item number 14, the enrollment projections going to the board on 12/18 at Ops Committee. So last year that did not actually take place. We did not finish the enrollment projections or do the enrollment projections until about the mid-January, almost the end of January. So we're trying to have the projections done earlier so we can engage the schools and get feedback. Like we're saying, we're trying to move it a little bit earlier, so we're giving more time for that. Bearing also in mind that that's the holiday season, so it's very difficult to get a lot of processes moving at that time of year, so we wanted to make sure we gave enough time to do that. All right. Next, as I'm sure you very well remember, we had a lot of feedback on community engagement. So one of the main critiques was that there was a lack of meaningful community engagement, meaning that we were having meetings, but there wasn't a great opportunity for community members to give feedback and input on the budget that was being developed. So that's something we're taking a serious look at this year. Not that we haven't before, but we're trying to go in a lot more detail with it this year. To that effort, the CEO's office has convened a work group incorporating feedback from different departments. We're looking at different ways to incorporate budget dialogue with the community or to incorporate feedback, the different ways that could be implemented. Whether that means, in central office, we're making specific decisions or proposing specific items that the community can give input on, or we're going more detailed into specific central office budgets. That hasn't been finalized, but we want to make sure that it's a meaningful engagement. It's not, people are not just seeing a budget and being told that this is what the budget is. I think we heard very clearly that they want the opportunity to give actual meaningful input into what's going into our district budget. So the timeline is built to accommodate that. We're starting that a lot earlier than we have before. Usually our community engagements don't take place till about February. And at that point, we know the budget's fairly static. There's not a lot of room for movement, a lot of room for change. We're trying to start this engagement this year much earlier. We're trying to start that, if you look on, where do we have it? Page 4. We have... community budget engagement, item number 15. So starting in November to January instead. So we haven't worked out the specific dates, but it's going to be a multi-tiered engagement. We're going to start with, a broader overview and the opportunities for input, and then the final engagement that we do in February will be more, here's what you've given input on, here's the final result, here's what it translates to. So they'll be able to see kind of the work in progress more so than in previous years. Next item we have is the school family council meetings. So there was a lot of feedback on this as well last year, that schools did not feel that the I mean, it was two-pronged. One, schools felt that, school communities felt that their schools did not have enough time to have the meetings with them. Also, there was feedback that they did not feel that the schools incorporated the feedback necessarily. So increasing the time here is to address both of those issues. We want to give the schools more time to reach out to their communities. One of the things that facilitated that was Human Capital Department was able to improve the process that they use for reconciliation. It's usually about a 4 to 6 week process. Last year, they were able to do the reconciliation in less than 2 weeks, about a week and a half. And because of the change in process and change in improvements, allowed us to move some of the time that was usually reserved for that at the end of the timeline and give us more time at the front end to provide more time for the SFC meetings and the community engagement. So we're really thankful for the change in process and the improvements that Human Capital has made and allowed us this flexibility in the calendar as well. But this, like I said, it's going to allow principals to notify their communities earlier of when the meetings are going to be, have the meetings, get feedback, and incorporate it into their budget before the collaboratives begin. So they're going to come to their collaboratives, hopefully with the meaningful feedback and input from their communities that they should have before developing their budgets. Last year, some schools only had a window of like 2 or 3 days to do that. Now we're giving an opportunity of up to about 3 weeks, depending on where the school falls within the collaboratives to do that. So again, the goal is to give a lot more time to get meaningful input. You have a question?
Yeah, no, I want to make a comment. I'm impressed with that because that was one of our biggest, greatest concern, especially when we went to our public meeting and in our community meeting. We weren't covering the city like we should have, and I think you did listen to what we were saying, and I'm impressed with this, very much so. I just want to mention that.
Thank you. The other aspect of that, and we've been working with the FCE department in terms of standardizing the engagements for the SFC meetings and what those look like, looking at model schools who do it well and trying to extrapolate that to other schools and make sure everyone's following the same, recommended practices for how their SFC meetings will be engaged and developed. Next item we have is the tool closing. So we use our in-house budgeting tools, both for enrollment adjustments and for the budget development. And this is not so much an outward-facing thing. This is more internal and feedback that we receive from central office and some of the departments. We have not been as stringent with the closing dates on the tools previously as we will be this year. Meaning, enrollment adjustments are supposed to go to a certain point. We usually have a handful of schools who, for some reason or another, and it's not always the school's fault. A lot of times, it's our fault in central office for processing or following up on issues, whatever the case is, that they end up becoming stragglers. They don't close within the time window that they're supposed to close, or they haven't received approval. We know all our schools are unique. The situation is never the same between any two schools. So going through the details of each individual school can sometimes take longer. So we're making sure this year that we're more aggressive earlier on, and we have the support of the Chief of Schools Office and the ILEDs in being aggressive with the schools to close out the transactions and to move the schools along that are delaying the process so that we're not delaying the timeline for any reason. So that's a big goal for us this year. It's been very difficult in previous years for us to have hard stops on these dates, so it's really a high priority for us this year. It's one of the things that will help us facilitate giving extra time to the things that we're making priorities, like the SFC meetings and the community engagements. So it's very important for us to move the timeline along. Next, and you probably remember this. We had a smaller window of opportunity for board preview into the budget last year. You remember we started some of the budget ad hoc meetings, but those started fairly late. So we're trying to start those a lot earlier this year so the board has more opportunities to see the budget in development, more opportunities to give input into the budget, more opportunities for the ad hoc meetings and to get into the nitty-gritty details, not just getting, a cursory or overview information. So we think it's beneficial to all parties involved. It helps on the back end for approval. It helps in terms of building a budget. It helps in terms of the community engagement and interaction and answering questions and just making sure everyone's on the same page. And the district is very united in how we present our budget, and everyone, is delivering the same message. Next item we have is cabinet planning. Last year, and this was largely due to the Fair Student Funding model, the process kind of got truncated a little bit because of that. So our cabinet planning didn't start until about March, and we only had a couple weeks within which, to kind of collaborate between offices and make decisions on how we're going to allocate central office funds. So we're trying to start that process a lot earlier, and that process would begin ideally with a deeper look at priorities. So not just, the specifics of here's the dollar value, how do you assign it, but what are you prioritizing and how does that interact with the other departments? Excuse me. So one of the main goals here is to make sure that cross-departmental communication is emphasized, that we're looking at, yes, I want to do A in my office, but then how does that affect B in this office? Or is this being duplicated, or is this being replicated, or is this the proper use of funds, or how do these priorities kind of fit together? So we wanted to make sure we gave a lot of time for chiefs and cabinet to sit down and discuss those decisions, to get feedback on those decisions, for the CEO to give input on those decisions, and that we're having a very comprehensive dialogue on the development. And the other reason why this is extended is because, again, tying back to the community engagement, we want to make sure the feedback we're getting from the community can be practically applied. We don't want cabinet being put into a situation where, the community's asked for A or B, and then we say, well, we just couldn't do it, we didn't have time. So we want to incorporate as much time as possible for those things to take place. We don't know what the end result of that will be yet, but at least trying to budget the time for it will make it a little more feasible. And that was the last major one. Are there any questions?
My question goes towards slide 4, and the number 1 piece is a funding model review. Can you just walk us what that might look like? It says it started, a week, 3 days ago or so.
Right. So as you guys recall, last year we implemented a new fair student funding model, and part of the agreement when we voted on that model, or when you voted on that model in January, was that we would look at the application of that model this year and determine whether or not we're going to keep the model as it is going forward, if we're going to make any adjustments to the model. So where we are right now is looking at where we've already allocated funds in the spring. The reason why this is ongoing in towards October is that a large chunk of this process will be determined by the enrollment adjustments and how they kind of fall and how they apply to schools. We've already noticed, kind of theoretical differences in terms of how the funding may change for the enrollment adjustments, and some of it is really going to be a practical application and a feedback from schools. So the spring budget, as you well know, is a preliminary budget, but based on what we do on the 930 numbers, that's the real budget that schools end up having to go through the year with. So we're going to take the feedback and information from the 930 enrollment and the adjustments, take the feedback and information from the schools and school leaders, and also engage the community again to make sure that we've taken a comprehensive look at the FSF model and that we're comfortable with the model going forward.
So I'm just, and I know we're in a hurry, Commissioner Bendima, so I'll try. But if the enrollment numbers are due 10-1, and by 10-12, we're going to decide if we're going with a different direction, a different philosophical approach to funding, that seems like a really compressed window.
So the 10-12 date would be the end of our review, but not necessarily your decision-making. By that point in time, we hope to have the information which we can present to you and then have you make a final decision in terms of if you think maybe your input would be that we might need to have another community engagement, or we present that information, or something else needs to take place. But we hope to have all our data ready by that point in time.
Okay. And then last question on this, charter funding review gets happened in that 8/20 to 10/12 window as well? Our charter funding formula is separate from?
So the charter funding formula was not a change necessarily as part of the FSF review. There were changes to the formula because of the analysis that we did and the work that we did with ERS, and there is some ongoing work. We have another vendor that we're working with currently in terms of working our communication with charters and looking at the various chargebacks and the things that have taken place. I really am not able to give the complete timeline on that and what that's going to look like incorporated into this, but it is isolated from the funding model review data that we're looking at here separately. So the work will be ongoing on that, and it's not going to be limited to just this point in time. I think building the FY20 model in general, we received a lot of, FY19, sorry. We received a lot of feedback in terms of how the changes took place and how they were implemented and, what they mean for charters going forward. And I think our district's prioritization of charters and charter work, is going to be part of the discussion, throughout the budget process.
Thank you.
Just to be clear on that process, that will be a public process too. There will be public meetings where we're going through that with, members of a charter community as well as members of the traditional school community to kind of just go through to make sure we have a transparent understanding of how the formula works, and then make transparent decisions about how do we implement any equity decisions that need to be made going forward to provide predictability for our charter schools, as well as address equity goals.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we're going to have the Comprehensive Maintenance Plan 2018.
Hello, I'm Jeff Wilson, Assistant Director of Mechanical and Engineering.
Lynette Washington, Interim Chief Operating Officer.
Monique Rumo, Assistant Director.
Blaine Lipsky, Director of Facility Maintenance and Operations.
So we're going to walk through the comprehensive maintenance plan for FY 2018. I'm going to talk very briefly about the purpose, talk about our budget and structure, then talk about some of our functions and systems and processes. So just as a general overview, the comprehensive maintenance plan, we submit this every year. It is a requirement from the state, but it is also a requirement as a part of the 21st Century Building Plan MOU, because there are metrics that are included that we have to comply with, is how we're maintaining some of the new facilities and how we're maintaining our existing facilities. And it is a 5-year plan that's approved by the board. In terms of the general staffing structure, is that we have the facility maintenance director, and there has been some structural changes, but right now we have, as a result, we have an assistant director of engineering and mechanical services, and also an assistant director of maintenance and operations, where we're combining both our contractual and in-house staff within departments. Some of the other additional changes is that the way that we are staffing the district is based off of geographical regions. So there are 4 different regions. Each region is supported by an area facility manager that is then supported by lead technicians and then supported by a team. The mechanical engineering team is not structured in this way, but that is something that we're looking to do as we add more staff to that org, the part of the org, and then also as we're looking to do additional corrective maintenance for our buildings. So just to go generally and very quickly over the organizational changes and staffing structure, we've merged the mechanical service and engineering. So before it was in-house engineers, and then it was a separate office for our contractual team. In order to improve efficiency and also accountability, we've merged them under an assistant director. We've also restructured the way that our contractual support supports us. They used to support us more as service calls, and so now what we're doing is that we're actually establishing a contractor to support a set of schools, which are about 4 schools. And so that person becomes more familiar with those facilities, and it's not just someone coming in to service a school and they're servicing another school the next day in another part of the city. We also, based off of some of the things that we experienced in January of being, having blind spots and not knowing what was going on within our schools, even though we had engineers that were going out and reviewing our buildings during a particular period of time, we felt that we didn't have the capacity in order to support and make sure that we were being able to assess all of our schools within a short period of time before students showed up for a class. And so what we're looking at is building automation systems where we have existing infrastructure in our buildings that can support it. So we're having virtually being able to monitor and watch what's happening within our buildings. And so we've already begun that process where we have a number of schools, about 40 schools or so, that we've brought that infrastructure so that we can visually see what's happening. And we plan on continuing that process over the next year or so, particularly in December. And at this period of time, we have an RFP that's going to go out sometime in September in order to address the automation systems that are not in some of our other facilities. And also, we've received support from the Maryland Stadium Authority in order to provide HVAC technicians to support each one of our 21st century buildings, something that we will absorb within our budget within 2 years. In terms of us tracking and how we plan and staff our buildings, there is industry standards that we review that basically says that for facilities where you're maintaining classrooms and schools, you should have 1 FTE per 80,000 square feet of space. We currently have 1 FTE per 130,000 square feet of space. And so based off of the budget increases, we are hoping to get to that 1 to 80. In terms of the 21st Century MOU, there was a commitment that's made by the board in 2014 about increasing the maintenance budget so that we can sufficiently staff our buildings and support our buildings. In FY19, we had that increase of the $3 million, and that's what we're using to support an additional 16 boiler maintenance workers within our facilities to help with preventative maintenance and provide additional oversight. And this is just an overview of our budget where we show that increase from FY 17, 18, and also 19. Generally, where our budget should be based off industry standards is 150 million. We know that we won't ever be there, but we show that over time, we'll actually be able to increase staffing with the budget increases. And so by FY 2023, we'll be at about 35 million, which means that we move from in FY 17, we were spending $1.15 per square feet. We'll be spending $2.13 per square feet with added staff and also added contractual support. And then lastly, this is just an overview so that you understand that facilities is supported by our in-house team, which is our repair team, which is broken into those 4 different regions, our grounds team, and then our engineers. Those are folks who are responding to a lot of our HVAC issues to assess. Then we also are supported by contractual support. These are where we have our more specialized contractors who are coming out on site handling some of our larger projects and our more specialized projects. And then Monique is going to walk us a little bit through what we spoke about earlier about the Blitz structure and those implications.
So this just details our regional structure, our staff per region, and the approach that we take to minor repairs. This gives you a visual of what that process looks like for the schools. So we start off with the inspection, the following week we do a blitz, and then 6 weeks later we come back around and we repeat the cycle. We've actually gone from 8 weeks to 6 weeks now in this fiscal year because we added a 4th region. In last fiscal year, we were doing 3 regions. In this fiscal year, we're now doing 4 regions. That's actually allowed us to bring down the number of schools that each area facility manager is managing from somewhere between 50 and 60 buildings now down to 30 to 40 buildings. This is a reflection of the impact of our regional structure with the Blitz. So the great thing about our computerized maintenance management system is that thank you. The great thing about our computerized maintenance management system is that it compares us to our peers using the system. So there are over 3,500 other institutions using School Dude. And so when you're looking at the bar tables here, you're seeing our productivity in blue. So in fiscal year 17, we were doing about 18 hours per tech per week in productivity. Just by implementing our regional structure and our Blitz cycle, we've increased our productivity by 4 hours per week. That's significant. But what it's showing us is that across our peers that are using the system, that the most productivity that we're getting, that any district is getting, is 27 hours a week out of a 40-hour week. And just by adding those 4 hours, we've basically added a month of productivity to our techs. And we anticipate improving our productivity just by the 4-region structure that we've recently gone to.
So in the median, you're saying, so the median, that's the median for any entities who are using that same, saying the School Dude?
Yeah,
So it's a national median?
Yeah, the national median is actually 20. We exceed the national median by 2 hours. By 2 hours per week per tech. This details the preventative maintenance that is done by contract maintenance throughout the year. So it varies depending on the system, and this work is done by outside vendors.
Hello, this slide details the timeline for PM, which is preventative maintenance for all HVAC systems. That includes boilers, chillers, air distribution in classrooms, air handler units, and such. Boilers are implemented for their preventative maintenance in June, with completion to be anticipated by October. Chillers are implemented in July. All the classroom equipment, air handlers and such for your climate distribution points are a year-round schedule, 12 to 14 schools per month. That's your filter changes, your motor changes, belts, lubrication and such. With the increase or the change implemented for the engineering and contractor supported for the buildings, that should reduce some of the timelines for the boiler PMs, hopefully to the 1st or middle of September for completion as this progresses.
Earlier, Dr. Washington mentioned metrics that we are responsible for according to our MOU, and this is just a snapshot. So the first one is saying that the percent of our open work orders greater than 60 days increased by 14.5%. In most cases, that wouldn't be good. But one of the things that has happened, that first year, FY17, that was our first year of implementation with School Dude. So we put in most of our work orders brand new, 0 days, so the work orders wouldn't have aged. So now that we're in FY18, we've gotten use in the system. We started putting in our work orders, tracking them more. The age has actually increased from last year into this year. But then there was also a learning curve. We rolled out technology to all of our technicians on the ground so that we can capture our work in real time. And many of them had not touched technology. So they were going in and putting in their labor hours, but forgetting to close their work orders. So that is what contributed to this increase in the number of work orders that are older than 60 days. So we're currently working with our teams to get all of those work orders closed. And then the other one just shows our average age of work orders and how long it takes us to complete work orders. Basically, the improvements here, again, are a reflection of the technology that we've rolled out to our technicians on the ground where we can close out stuff in real time.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Real quick, last spring, it was, and you might have already said this, so I'm just, when you package in a whole lot in a short period of time, I'm just going over it, and just tell me if you already talked about it. But our big concern, and I mentioned before, to develop a system, and I think, if I'm hearing right, I think this is solving that system. When I talked about when there was a necessary for a principal to remember I said something about putting in a work order where we could track, if the needs of the school, to put it in the system, and we could go into the system and see when it was filed, what date, what time, and you just mentioned something about they weren't putting in the system when it was completed. Is this the same thing that you're talking about?
Yes, ma'am. That actually hits our next slide where we're talking about improving our systems and processes. So that's our computerized maintenance management system, School Dude. So we will be rolling it out to principals so that they can self-report, put in their own work orders. It captures the timestamp. They can add photos. They can put a number of items into that work request.
I'm impressed because this stayed on my mind from last semester. Where am I? From last spring, because and just as I mentioned, I couldn't see why we couldn't do that. And it sounds like you guys listened, Dr. Washington, and you did what we wanted done. And I don't know if the CEO or our administrative assistant, Allison, can look at it too. You can pull it up on your computer and see. Is it possible that you can see, when you get a complaint from a school, you can see where they are with that particular issue? You can see that?
I can't at this time. I think that's something, I think what we're trying to make sure right now is that principals have access to it so that they can see the status of their work orders. We haven't talked about people answering the phones, for example, but.
And and even when we spoke about it, we had the system in place, but it's a work in progress, right? And so one of the things that Monique is saying is that we wanted to take time to train the team, and some parts of the team who had not had access to technology, we wanted to train them and make sure that they are putting the work orders in and then completing them. And now there's a training for principals. Again, there's going to be a process, right? So how they put the work orders in, understanding what is a work order and how to put it in and how to follow and track it. And then we start including other folks who are in, North Avenue or different administration, because the amount of information has to be reviewed. It has to make sure that that is actually good data so that when we are pulling up reports, it's actually accurate reporting. It's not something where someone has issued it complete and the project wasn't completed.
I'm so impressed with that because that's exactly, we're behind on that. Yeah. So where you're going is perfect. So excellent. We'll wait for you to continue to add to it. In other words, right?
Commissioner, I'd also like to add that in the process of developing and initiating all this our staff and the schools, it was on our Assistant Director, Monique. It was taken away from her duties. We identified that, and we identified a position, a CMMS analyst that we recently hired, and she's undergoing training now and developing. She'll be doing the actual analytical backdrop information for us to review on a daily basis, weekly visit with our teams. So we are taking steps to develop our team to a further height.
I'm not trying to beat this up and we can then continue, but this is one of the greatest concern that I have, because when we get reports, newspaper reports, outside reports that we aren't doing our job, we are doing our job and we can record that we're doing our job. So we don't have to guess. We can look at it, and whatever way you're going to monitor that, that is critical, because it shows that we're on top of it. We had an issue, we got it done, and we're moving forward, so.
The last piece on the CMMS is that because, again, I mentioned that we had the dude intelligence piece that compares us to our peers, it's also our decision maker. So the bottom part graph says average count of work orders per employee per year. This is one of the major decision makers for why we went to a 4-region structure. We're the ones in the blue. It's showing that we have a significant number of work orders that we assign to our folks, and when we look at our peer median, they have half the number of work orders assigned to their people. So it's a reflection of the amount of resources that we need. And so because we know that it'll take time to get the resources, we use this to figure out how we can strategically change our structure or move work around so that we're being efficient with what we have. And that's how we came up with our 4-region structure.
What's the title under that third set of columns? It's maintenance, custodial, and
Grounds.
grounds. Thank you.
Yes.
Old eyes. I was like,
No
I
problem.
couldn't get it here on the PowerPoint, and I couldn't get it up there, and I'm like, grounds.
Sure thing.
Not a criticism, much more of a confession.
No problem. We'll make it larger, though. The last piece for this, at least for me, would be we have the building maintenance plans. This is for our 21st century buildings. So what it does is it lays out pretty much how we maintain the building. It gives the schedule, ideally how long it should take to accomplish that task, and what that cost would be. Our frequency and our scope is solely based upon our resources and what we're able to do. And this is just a reflection of what is in a building maintenance plan.
Any qualitative components to that where you say to a principal, are there rooms that are cold? Are there rooms that are exceptionally hot? Some of the things that you can't necessarily measure by looking at the boiler itself.
You want to get it, does that line up with the building automation?
Well, it's not qualitative.
I mean, I think that that's something that we need to continue to explore. How do we provide a qualitative piece to read beyond the data, right? So if a project is completed, what is the quality of the completion? How did the staff interact with the principal? So I think that those are additional things that we really need to go forward and checking out.
Oh, also the BAS, the automated system will help get at that. So the automated system would give us a view into the individual classroom temperatures, because to your point, a lot of our schools, overall the temperature may be okay, but the variation between rooms, and that's true in this building too, the variation between rooms may
True in
be.
large institutional buildings,
Yes.
period. This
Yes.
is not a school issue,
That's
this
right.
is not an aging issue,
That's
it's a
right,
reality.
may be different, and so those automated systems will give us a view into a large percentage of classrooms, not every classroom, but a large percentage of classrooms for buildings, so that we have a sense of where that range is, so we don't have to rely on anecdotal information. I mean, one of the things that was a challenge in January was the anecdotal information, because my warm is very different from your warm. My husband will tell you I'm freezing all the time, so my sense of what it takes to be warm. So having actual data to inform our decision-making of how we're prioritizing our repair resources and so on is going to be really critical to that.
And you know what, I think that that's a problem that we'll have forever and ever. You can have it in your homes, you can have it anywhere, because it's always going to be a difference in each room and each location according to the location of the room, the side of the building. And we have this problem in your home. You have it in your home. One room is colder than the other, and you have to figure out what to do and make adjustments. So I think as long as we're aware that this is going on and we acknowledge that we're continuing to work on it, I think that's positive. Okay?
The next slide touches base on the building automation system. Historically, we've had to have a staff on site in order to measure temperatures, check the operation of equipment and such. The building automation, what we have to look at is the first steps of this is the visibility and the monitoring of the building, not necessarily the control of the building. What this does is gives us critical temperature settings, temperature sensors in different parts of the building that report back and gives us critical alerts. That would be the boiler operation, whether the boiler's on, whether the boiler's off, pumps on, pumps off, temperatures in the buildings with a high temperature reading and a low temperature set point, and we get emails that tells us we have an issue with that school. That's already been tested, and it's not implemented, but we're doing tests on that currently and getting these all in place at the current 40 sites, and then some of the other ones that are coming on board here in the recent times.
Can you give us a timeline of when we would have, I know there's the different categories of sites that have something in place now, and when would we have all schools on a system like this?
So I think that for us to be accurate on the timeline, we have to get through like the bid process. So we have an RFP out, and so it's about how the capacity of the contractors who will be supporting the work. If we don't have extensive capacity, or if that capacity is supporting us for our in-house services, then that timeline may be a lot longer, or that time may be shorter. But I think that we really need to be able to see what the responses are after we issue out the RFP.
This was something we prioritized after last January, so that we could more effectively prioritize our work, because a lot of the response kind of work we had to do in January was often to cases where we got a report of a freezing cold building, and then we would go out there and it actually wasn't cold at all. I mean, there was real cases too, but it was hard to differentiate. So we need to be able to in real time differentiate where our biggest problems are.
Right. But one of the things that we, as Judge said, we are bringing schools online and testing and different things like that. So in terms of the full portfolio, that's where we really need to get the response from the RFP.
So getting the real-time data is a spectacular thing. I'm wondering if the BAS interfaces, especially around the 24/7 automatic notification, with school safety protocols, doors propped open, alarms. Is it all the same system? Are we doing system redundancy?
No, so this would be our system that's just focused on our HVAC systems. It's not really focused on some of the larger, like the smart building systems. That wouldn't be this system.
Just trying to figure out how we can do, two birds, one rock at some point.
So I'll run through these last two slides very quickly, and I'll probably change this color. So the Association of Physical Plant Administrators, they have these maintenance level of services to help building owners determine how well they are managing their systems or their buildings. And so as an operations team, we all sat together and we had an honest conversation with ourselves and team members to try and figure out, based upon these level of services that they've laid out, where do we see ourselves? And we found ourselves as a manager care, meaning that we're somewhat organized, our components are mostly functional, there are variable response times. What we are looking for with the changes that we've recently made, we're looking to move to a level 2 where we have comprehensive stewardship, where we are organized with direction, where our building systems are usually functional, and that we have a timely and predictable response. The optimal would be this showplace facility where we're able to upgrade all of our facilities, our infrastructure, all of that. We understand the reality of our work, but we do believe that it is feasible that we can reach a comprehensive stewardship at a level of service 2. And this final slide just lays out some of the things that we have implemented over this last year and will continue to implement in order to get to that level of service. I won't read through all of it, but we think that we are headed in the right direction, and we'll just continue to slow down and analyze and look at where we can improve it in our inefficiencies.
And so the last slide is just an overview of the 21st century school buildings. And we, again, have a commitment to make sure that we're maintaining those facilities.
So Again, I just want to also talk about some of the work this team has done with some of our outside partners. So they've been very open to bringing in outside expertise to help advise us. And so we've had a lot of outside partners who've been very generous with their time. So from Sagamore Group, from Don Manikin, Bazzuto Group, and Merit Properties have all kind of offered to serve as an advisory capacity with us. And so we've met with them a few times. Sagamore has gone out with our team on a Blitz cycle to actually see it in action and then provided kind of written response about ways in which we could improve that process. They've reviewed all of the way we've organized ourselves. They've offered to help us look at our, we've done a lot of work at looking at our job descriptions and our organizational structure. They've offered to help look at that and then see if we are kind of, if the organization makes sense, and also if there are clear pathways for employees to move up in the org structure, and then what training should be aligned with that, and to help us set that up. So we've been very appreciative for that assistance, and the team has been very open to having that kind of outside help looking at our work and helping us get better.
Thanks, and welcome aboard, everyone who's new.
Good morning, Commissioner Bondima, Hassan, Dr. Washington, Christian, Chief of Staff. My name is Sherry Vinson. I'm the Interim Executive Director for the 21st Century School Buildings Program, and I have two schools this morning to present to you for your consideration for their enhanced approval packages. The first one is Robert Coleman. That is the current condition of Robert Coleman. In this particular school, we have, which is right next to Coppin State University and shares a campus with Frederick Douglass High School. This particular school has been selected for a strategic renovation. And in that strategic renovation, we have stayed largely within the existing footprint of the school, but have added two minor additions, one to increase the size of the cafeteria, and the other to help identify and create a secure vestibule at the entry point of the school. I'm sorry, I'm not here. At all?
There's a DJ.
Okay, I gotcha. Try this one instead? Let's try. Is that better? Can you hear me better? Okay. Did you want me to repeat anything that I just said? Yes, so we increased two small additions, one to increase the size of the cafeteria, and the other to increase the to make it easier to identify the entrance point of the building, and also to create a secure vestibule at the entrance point as well.
What? Secure,
So for secure vestibule, so securing
well, I
access.
know that's seated, but okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. This was an open floor plan school, and so two of the challenges here were that there was quite a sort of a maze of not full height partitions within the center of the floor plan to create additional classrooms. So there were many classrooms that had no natural light, but there was a lot of sound bleed over from the partitions that were not all the way to the ceiling. And so what we were able to devise here was to push everything out to the perimeter so that all classrooms would have natural light. We were able to right size some of the classrooms as well. And so the existing gym you see at the back, and then toward the front, we had the challenge also of creating community space in an area that would be accessible to the big box spaces. And I think we were able to do that here with a means of still being able to close off the academic portion of the floor. So the dining, the kitchen, the community space, and the gym would all be sort of clustered to the eastern side of the floor plan. And then on the second floor, and it is only a two-story building, you have your first, second, third, fourth, and fifth grade students. This is only a two-section school, and that still allowed us to provide some collaborative space as well. And then the media center is on this floor with science, the science lab, and the music and drama room as well. This school is also unique in as much as it has a partnership with the Holistic Life Foundation, and so their mindfulness room is very important to them. They have basically a zero suspension rate in this school because of the work that they've done with the mindfulness program, and so we wanted to make sure that that room was also included in the final floor plan. So again, the exterior won't change very much in terms of the actual footprint, but a nicer well, of course, windows and doors, a nicer entrance, a more identifiable entrance, and then they've actually added some additional windows there that you see on the right would be the cafeteria area. And again, from the front of the building, and then your elevations to the east and west as well. And that's it for that one. Any questions about Robert Coleman?
I was looking at your design because when I used to be the chair of science and math, I did an environmental science project there. They had a vegetable garden and all that stuff. I'm looking at it to see where they can put their environmental garden.
So if we
That
go
was a long
back,
time ago.
that is something they mentioned that they would like to have. If you see on this slide, it's a little bit hard to read, but we have community garden there at the front of the building. We've given them new play spaces. So right now there's an older playground, I think, in that area. So some of the playground space would move to the elevation to the west side of the building. We were contemplating raised beds there. I'm also always mindful of the possibility for some community garden activity. There's some grants that are available, and if the timing were to be correct for this particular school, it might be possible to capture one of those as well, and
Okay.
perhaps do a little bit more with that.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
So on the map of the first floor, I'm guessing it would be on the first floor.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of spaces that are indicated as a T. I'm guessing that's just.
Those are toilets?
Oh, okay, restrooms, thank you.
Yes,
All right,
sorry.
So are there, because what I was specifically looking for is there a place for washer, dryer, hookup, and shower?
So in the community space, part of that space is always set aside for personal care. So the washer and dryer would be there, and then also, if we can, we would include a shower if that's possible.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mhm. And then the next
Thank
school
you.
is James Mosher,
Okay.
which will come up in just a second.
Yeah,
There we go.
James Mosher Elementary School.
Yes.
Okay.
And if you recall, James Mosher and Calverton were two additional schools that we did a grade band reconfiguration on, similar to Cherry Hill and Arundel. So Calverton did swing early, as you might remember, and so will be a complete replacement school. That will be grades 3 to 8, and this school, James Mosher, will be the PK to 2. So again, here we are showing that a more identifiable entrance, perhaps with an overhang there. And you can see this is not very large, is it? There we go, thank you. This shows the proximity of James Mosher and Calverton. I guess that's not going to advance. I'm sorry, you might have to help me. There we go. Thank you, sorry. Okay. Perfect. So right now, one of the issues here in this school is that they did not have a drop-off, and so oftentimes parents and buses will pull up on Mosher, and particularly cars I've observed where parents will allow their children to get out and just kind of walk up to the door between parked cars on their own. So here we've attempted to show a drop-off possible along West Mosher Street. The entrance on the Wheeler Avenue side would actually be closed and become perhaps just a large storefront there, glass, because that particular entrance is not used. It's not accessible. You actually have to walk up steps once you get inside the building. And so we would concentrate on the entrances from North Warwick and from Mosher. And so they would then, those would all be accessible entrances, and we would use the portico and make it a more attractive entrance coming off of West Mosher Street. Again, here it's a renovation addition option, and the reason for that is so that we could cluster the big box spaces at one end of the horseshoe, so to speak. The back of this property is a Cal Ripken baseball field, which was only recently put in within the last couple of years. It's quite nice and heavily used. What we were thinking here is that the gymnasium, the cafeteria would all be clustered on the one side. We might actually flip that gym and cafeteria so the gym has more direct access going back to the rear of the property where the Cal Ripken ball field is. But expanding the playground within sort of the courtyard area inside the U of the building, moving the cafeteria that currently exists in the bottom of that U up, again, new cafeteria, gym, and kitchen at the one side, and then the community space as well. So all of those spaces are clustered together. And then the rest of the classrooms on that floor would be your PK and K students. And then, oops, I'm sorry, next slide, please. Thank you, and a little bit bigger. Actually, this is an expansion of the first floor again, just so that you have the labeling, so you can see the classrooms that were placed along the axis, of course, across the front of the building and then on the east side. Circulation works very simply in this building, obviously, but again, just making sure that all the big box spaces are clustered together. And then the second floor, it's only 2 floors, is your first grade and second grade students. And then you have your, I'm actually looking for, okay, there's the media center, sorry. The media center is on the second level as well. So some things we were not able to move, for example, the entrance, we would like to have taken advantage of the Art Deco side of the building, but it just was not a good point of entry for the building without moving way more than we wanted to move in terms of a more strategic approach to this renovation. And then the next slide, please. So again, you'll see, whoops, there's the Art Deco side, which we would then, would become more of a storefront in glass, and that would be a collaborative space there in the center instead of an entrance. And then you'd see the entrance would then become the south elevation along West Mosher. Somehow that's the same slide repeat. Oh, I guess, right. So the next slide, please, would just show the remaining 2 elevations. So again, all new doors and windows, interior finishes, AVIT package that would be the 21st century level, and then just a better layout for the PK to first grade PK to second grade students, excuse me, and then with the clustered entrances for the community and the big box spaces. Any questions? Oh, and there's just a view looking back toward the ball field that I was referring to earlier, and that would be the play space within the U of the building itself.
Given this is a pre-K through three?
Two.
Through two building, any wisdom in not walling off the back to keep the courtyard completely contained?
So we would, typically we can put fencing up, but excuse me, the view to the ball field and then just the accessibility of being able to leave the play space, perhaps the children to be able to go straight to the ball field. I don't think
But there will be a fence there.
Yes.
Okay. It's clearly not in the picture. And
No.
little ones like to
Yeah.
wander, especially
Right,
cool things
exactly.
like ball fields at crossroads.
Right, and so it would be, one of the other things that would be better about this is that currently, loading comes to the kitchen because as I said, the kitchen is in the bottom of the U currently. So loading, the drive comes all the way in, so it comes right in conflict, with any play space that's there now. So this would be, no vehicular traffic would come into this space at all. You'd have your parking on the side. If we go, it's not easy to go back to the other slide, but the parking and the entrance to the kitchen, would be, it would actually be all the way back. There you go, right there. So the parking would come in, and if we flip the kitchen, it would actually be even closer to the street coming in from the west side. And on the east side, you'd have the parking at the end of that shorter leg of the school, but nothing would come in and interfere with the play spaces. You're welcome.
Good morning. I'm Joe Vogel, Purchasing Manager.
Good morning. I'm Jim Brennan, Executive Assistant to the COS.
And if we could get you to pull your mics close, it's nearly impossible to hear anything up here.
Sorry.
Again, confession of old. It's ears and eyes.
It's the outside.
I know I'm the old one of the two of us.
Do you have any questions for any of the agenda items?
Yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry.
The first item is an extension of the existing contract for Ms. Vincent, who just testified, to continue her work as interim executive director for the 21st Century Schools program while we continue to search for a permanent replacement. The board issued an order on May 8th allowing 180 days for this contract to continue, which would get us to the week of November 12th. Right. And we are funded through August. We're looking for 11 weeks of funding to Brailsford and Dunleavy to get us to the week of November 12th. It's 11 weeks, a total of $66,000, and we're fully reimbursed by MSA for this expense.
So my question related to this is the board approved up until November 16th. So should we find someone who's capable and able and interested in taking over that position?
They would be brought in.
This contract terminates the day of termination?
Correct.
Or does it go till the
No,
November
it's
16th regardless?
actual time, so.
Okay. So this is an up to November 16th?
So optimistically,
Up
if we
to
can replace
increase by 60 days.
her with a permanent position, this contract would cease as soon as that person started.
And just to be clear, that's a conversation about the position, not about the person. Like, it's not
Oh,
like we're
no.
trying to, just
not at
for
all.
public, in case people are thinking, they hate, no, that's not the conversation.
No, not at all.
Thank you.
you know, explain to me about the numbers from the 66,000.
Yeah,
It's
that's to,
increased starting from what to November?
that's to cover from September the 3rd until the week of November 12th, which ends on the 16th. It's 11 weeks, and the expense is $6,000 per week.
6,000 a week. That's that position.
Yeah, that's, well,
The person.
Sherry Vincent is an employee of Brailsford and Dunleavy. She has done work for us in the past. So we pay Brailsford and Dunleavy, they pay Ms. Vincent, and then MSA reimburses us for the full expense
So
of
she's
it.
still employed by them.
Yes. Which is why there needed to be an NDA signed, which was signed by her and by Brailsford and Dunleavy, since she is an employee of theirs. And that was part of the 180 days. The Ethics Committee agreed that we had made a good faith effort to find a qualified employee. It's a very difficult position to fill because of the amount of technical knowledge that you need. So under the circumstances, they allowed us to continue to use her in that position as interim executive director for a 180-day period, which would bring us out at November 16th.
Mr. Skinner, where are we with the search? Thank you. Sorry to snatch you.
This position has been posted since back in, I think, February, after the previous executive director left the district. And we also have been working with a search firm, and we are about to provide a list of eligible candidates to the 21st Century office for their consideration for selection. So I anticipate that perhaps even within the next month, we could have an identified candidate.
How many people do you have on the list?
About 20 individuals applied. Some of those applicants did not meet the minimum criteria, but about 20 people in all.
And have you broken it down yet?
I don't have the number here
Okay.
of how many were marked
So the
eligible.
possibility that we, like you just said, if we break it down and we are able to hire somebody, it could possibly be for a month, in another month, at least a month?
Yeah,
Okay.
I would say the best case, but also one that seems possible at this point, is that someone would be identified within the next month.
Next month. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
And that general question goes to, there's several procurement items on this list that are, and I'm going to lose the words because it's not my world in which I live, but additional funding to close the gap, to be able, there's a word for it. More money to finish the job. And because there's so many, 4 or 5 of them, wondering if this is just common practice, what this does if we'd looked at those addendums versus the original bids. Say Company Washington and Company Bondima both submitted a response to an RFP. We decided to go with Company Bondima, but now they need additional funds to finish. In the end, does it come out to be the higher amount that Company Washington originally proposed? Sort of philosophically, how is this fitting in our overall RFP process? How are we ensuring that we're going with the lowest dollar bid, but it's not ending up being a higher dollar bid in the long run? Just general.
Would you know, that brings up something, I do have one comment or question, I don't know. The Chalmar Corporation, is that, am I saying, yeah, Chalmar Corporation. I was just wondering, you said something about, I didn't understand what you meant by unknown hazards. Something underneath existing underground. What did that mean?
Right, so usually, and I think that this is there's two of them. The Clyde McHenry one also, no, I'm sorry, the J.F. Fisher one also is an increase.
Okay.
Sometimes when the construction work starts, there's some things that were unknown
Yeah,
and
okay.
that the contingency can't cover. So for the Chilmar Corporation, the work began and then they discovered that there was some asbestos work that also, once they start removing walls, floors, and some of those different things, and that the contingency couldn't cover, and so that's why there's an increased cost. So that's a site unknown. For the J.F. Fisher, there was vandalism that consistently happened
Yeah, I
on
saw
that site.
Yeah.
And so that was, again, another unknown. And so when the contingency is generally a certain percentage, when the contingency cannot cover it, then we have to come to the board
Okay.
to ask for that increase.
Okay. I don't have any more questions. Commissioner, do you have any more questions?
Well, I'd love
The procurement?
a response to the first set of questions, just in general. If bids are going over contingent, is it putting them in the same bracket that a different bid would have been in? And do we need to relook at our RFP process?
So for the facility ones, if our bids go over, generally a lot of times we can't move forward with it because it's state funded. So for facilities purposes, so generally a lot of times when we're asking for additional funds, it's for those things that were unknown on the site. But I'm going to leave it to Joe for the other
I was
ones.
going to say this,
And there's always unknowns, and construction always costs more than we thought it was going to. It just feels like we do this a lot, and so I'm wondering if there isn't, and it may just be what doing business is in this realm, but I'm just wondering how many other bids might have gotten a shot, but we haven't quite started yet. We're still operations. But you're welcome to join us. How many other bids might have been competitive bids, given the additional beyond contingency funding? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and so if I think that some of it is the fact of doing business, because again, a lot of times until you start tearing down walls, sometimes you don't know what other additional hazards there are. And a lot of that comes with our roof projects too. Until we get in and start removing things, we don't know what's behind. And again, with the vandalism, which is actually something that has been ongoing and occurring a lot with our window projects, we don't know what the issue may be. So sometimes we attempt to build in a higher contingency so that we can be able to cover that, but we don't know from neighborhood to neighborhood what issues or concerns may be happening, that we have to come and cover it with our local resources.
So I would just hope that we're tracking that, so that then we can look and see if Company Washington is always not getting the bid because they're $50,000 more, but all the bids that we're giving to someone else become $50,000 more than contingent. Perhaps we need to look differently at Company Washington as an option. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that we've asked the questions, and some of the questions we might want to answer some more questions later. But thank you for a good day, I think. And our next meeting for operations will be September the 18th, 2018. It'll be in the boardroom here, and on a Tuesday. I think it'll be a Tuesday. And thank you very much, and have a great day. Thank you.
And if staff who have a minute have not gone out to the ice cream social, you should go. It was really good ice cream. I just had some. And board members should go too. It's fine with me because you probably want ice cream. There's two types of ice cream. There's soft serve and there's Takara Brothers hard ice cream.
Well, since I'm guessing that doesn't comply with the wellness policy, I'll pass.
Sure it
But
does, because there's also dancing, so you can work
I
it
can
off.
dance too. So for those people in the public who are waiting for the policy meeting to start, should we say 11:45 to give staff a chance to celebrate a little? Does that work for you, Allison? Okay, so we'll start at 11:45. Thank you so much.